Appalshop is so nice we gave them that $15,000. Bullshit! We wouldn't have raised that money if it weren't for the work that Hemp Hill was doing. And that's the point, that this is not about service. This is not about us having and the community not having. This is about co-creation. And that is the radicalism in this work. It is a quiet, non-partisan radicalism. But we are making that together. And in fact, at that time, there are many stories we can tell about that, but that money for the brick oven went in, it was the collective partnership fund of the Letcher County Culture Hub, which at that point had 12 different partners, to organizations like Hemp Hill, struggling of, by, and for the people, what we call free spaces or community centers of power, some civil rights language. And that was a sizable chunk of the money we had in the pot right then. And all of those organizations, and I won't say it was easy, it was many conversations and a lot of frustration, unanimously voted to devote that money to the brick oven because they said this is an opportunity to do what the term culture hub we learned from a Jamaican economist who we've been working with for many years, who all of us know. Culture hub is an organization that can catalyze a community's ability to recognize latent assets and turn it into community wealth. So we call it cooking. Cooking is something we do for survival and subsistence, but understanding it as catering, that's something that we can actually monetize and something we can actually put people to work in. The same way folks come out of the drug court, it's often seen as societal liabilities. Through our work, you know, here are the assets. Here are the assets that they got. And to function as a culture hub, this was such an important opportunity that we are going to not take this money for ourselves. Other struggling community organizations who were going to invest it in the Hemp Hill. And so I just think there's always the story and the counter story. And I thought that story was particularly worth relating.
He was talking about latent assets. We had these drug court participants who were coming to fill their requirement for community service hours. And we quickly recognized that there had been a brain drain into the jails with the opioid crisis. You know, they talk about a brain drain and out migration. Well, there's been a brain drain into the jails. And I believe that largely in Appalachia we've been victimized yet again by that opioid crisis, because I don't think it's by chance that all that got done on us. And so that's just a little side. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Denise.
Yeah, we have been in the news, national news, I believe, for the last 5 years. Baltimore, West Baltimore, 2015 uprising, the big case with the drug task force, the numerous shootings of citizens and police officers. So we, Art Social Club and the Art Social Club Community Network sits right on the corner of Pennsylvania and North Ave. And that was like the center that the media filmed with the Baltimore uprising. Well, that's where we are. Just a small fact to kind of give you the breadth of the intersection. It is the second busiest public transportation intersection in the city of Baltimore. I've learned as an organizer, and I call myself a cultural organizer, because of incorporating that cultural tool into the work of organizing and using the integrating the arts, which allows a whole different population of people to engage. And so part of the learning and working with artists has been, and I want to try to say this in the most respectful way, because I think artists are wonderful people. And when I had my first encounter with an artist that was able to visualize something in my community that I saw, which was the highway to nowhere, when the government was putting highways in black neighborhoods and displacing lots of family. That particular piece of concrete was all I ever could visualize. But this artist came into the community with a whole different vision for this 42-acre piece of concrete, and I was just wowed by the fact that someone could see something, and all I could ever see all of those years was concrete that really caught my attention. But the other part that I think is so relevant to the work that we do with organizing and culture and power is the shared knowledge piece. And that is what happened in the work of learning the knowledge of artists learning the knowledge of organizing. It becomes a whole different kind of dance that is absolutely beautiful. And everybody's standing in what they know, but learning to be respectful. And the most important thing is motivating the community to become engaged using the creativity of the art. And then finding out that you have all of these creative people in the community, and that creativity has not been tapped, as opposed to having them show up and participate in a meeting. But to add the cultural piece, and it shows a whole different level of respect for the community. So that's been a big learning piece of the work. That shared knowledge and it's a part of what we do with performing our future, sharing knowledge and resources.
When I said earlier that there were some similarities between Hill Community Center, you can see up on the screen how vastly different that Hill Community Center is from the Arch Social Club. But the Arch Social Club, I learned, was established as kind of a free or a safe space during a time where there weren't many of those spaces where African Americans and people of color could go and fellowship with each other and hang out and have a good time. Well, one of the similarities with Hemphill Community Center is we have been fighting a brave fight, and it is a fight, to establish a free space at our community center where, I consider myself white and Christian and heterosexual, but where not everyone is just like me, that anyone who is different from me in any aspect will still be welcome and will still be shown respect. And that's one of the similarities that we have. I was approached week before last by the county judge executive in our county, and he came to tell me that he had a call. Now, whether this is bullshit or not, I don't know, and I'll never know. But he came and wanted to tell me that someone who had called, who votes at the precinct, that votes we're a polling place. And we've always been a polling place as long as that building's been there for the elections. And he said that someone had called him and didn't want to come in that space to vote because we had a hate-free zone signs with a rainbow in the background. And so I blasted him in the newspaper with my weekly article, and one thing that happened though was that paper came out on Wednesday, and Friday night we did more business at Black Sheep Bakery than we've done in 2 months. We had people of color who came to eat there, and we had LGBTQ folks who came to eat, and we had folks of different religions who came to eat with us on Friday night. And I think that similarity, I've not got to go up there yet to Denise's place, but that makes me want to go, because we have to make a space for people who are different. I don't want to just, you know, a lot of you are white, y'all might be Christian and heterosexual, but you know, I'm not totally interested in just hanging out with you all.
That's the rooting. Re-expression.
I want some diversity and some spice.
And so one of the things about the club space in terms of its service to the community, you know, people hold their weddings there, their receptions and their, what do you call it, when people pass?
Funerals.
Funerals, wakes, yeah. Various groups, and some are political. They use the space. A couple of weeks ago, we had this youth group. They call themselves the Black Wolves, and so they have recreated the black flag, the red, green, and black flag, and have the youth involved. And so we have this group in the city called Pop Vibe. They're drummers. They're African drummers. And they've been drumming in Goodhill Park, which is one of our big green spaces in the city, for over 25 years. And they came to the Art Social Club to participate in this flag recreation. And, you know, club members, they open their doors and they, you know, let folks just drum outside on the sidewalk, which is what we represent in terms of free space, open space, creative space, spaces, use of space to reflect what's important to people.
So another concept that we think about a lot from that same Jamaican economist, who, by the way, talk about free space and, you know, working with people that are different. That guy loves him some Donald, he loves him some capitalism, he loves him some all sorts of things that I personally find rather abhorrent. And he very much knows that I find them abhorrent. And yet, what's fascinating is, on theoretical issues, we could not be farther apart. And yet, on the practical issues of how do we build this work, we agree on everything. It's fascinating. And so in addition to culture hub, another term that we've learned from him is called bounded imagination. And what he says is, and this is the key to, like, how does a conservative economist give a damn about culture, let alone grassroots culture? Communities that have experienced long-term intergenerational exploitation, and I'm just looking at Denise because I'm getting really close to using that language that she does not like, and I respect that. A major aspect of that exploitation is the bounding of the imagination. Things can't be different tomorrow from how they were yesterday. That block of concrete can't look any different than it does to me right now. And the reason why, according to Flutie, who is not into social justice, and he is not into, liberation of the oppressed, what he's into is how do communities build sustainable economies. That's it. What he says is just to be able to do that, we have to unbound our imaginations. And the way to do that starts with stories, starts with cultural work, starts with all this stuff that we are talking about. The Letcher County Culture Hub started with bluegrass festivals and square dances, and I was just thinking, can I even call myself an organizer? This stuff is so damn vanilla. But then 3 years into it, we just pulled off the biggest alternative energy project, net meter, homegrown alternative energy project in the history of East Kentucky, led by some people like the lady to my right, who is unabashedly pro-coal and Trump voter. So that is the kind of work that can be done when you start with stories and unbound our imaginations, including, oh, I could never work with her, she has different politics from me. Oh, I could never work with her, she's a different race from me. Oh, we could never work together because our communities are in different parts of the country. They're urban versus rural. They're majority of color, they're majority white, they're majority whatever. So many people have said, well, how is this even possible? Well, let me tell you that when I started working in East Kentucky, in our county of Letcher County, one county in the coal fields, I go out and half an hour from Whitesburg to a coal camp, not Hemphill, but another one, with about 125 people in it. They call me an outsider, not because I'm from Connecticut, but because I'm from Whitesburg. Communities are divided on every level if we let them be. And we can always find an excuse to say, oh no, we could never work with them. And by the same token, we can always find a way that our stories are shared. It's funny you say you see those things as Hemphill and the Arch being so different. I look at them and I think they're so similar. And that has been true, starting to build across communities within Letcher County and then across communities far outside of Letcher County. I want to say just a few concluding things and then want to have space for us to dialogue a little bit. So the question is, we've told a lot of really specific stories because that's how the work's always got to start, in specific stories. You know, one thing that folks at Roadside say is, you want to build a bridge, it's only going to be as strong as the posts on either side. So if you want to have connection, first you've got to get really strong and rooted. So we get rooted in our stories, we do the local organizing in Letcher County, we do the local organizing in West Baltimore, and then we have a sense of ourselves, we've built strength, and then we can go across. So how do we build that bridge to Morgantown? How do you all build those bridges in those places? All the stuff that we do is culturally specific. A thing that we like to say, which is a little bit smart-ass, but I don't care, is we don't believe in best practices, we believe in best principles.
And better practices.
And better practices. And the core of those best principles is on the second page, the second full page of your packet. First page, a little introduction. Second page gives you a sense of the 4 current delegations, 2 of whom you see represented here, the Letcher County Culture Hub and the Arts Social Community Network. Our friends in rural and urban Wisconsin and the Black Belt of Alabama were not able to join us here, but they are every bit as awesome in their own special ways, and both different and similar. We have all met together and have all together agreed on the approach to the work on that third page with that 3-colored diagram which expresses the extent of my graphic design skills. But this is what Denise was talking about a second ago. That what we are working toward is a synthesis of telling our own stories, building our own power, and creating our own wealth. Grassroots cultural work, broad-based community organizing, and community wealth creation, where communities are working on even terms with each other and with the professionals, the people who, you know, with the PhDs. Because I guarantee you I learned a lot more than I taught you. And the fact is that the only, and Denise talks a lot about this too, that for this to work, we have to work as fellow citizens of these places that we are living in. And the way we can do that most effectively, and as far as we know, the only way we can do that most effectively, is to find the Hemphill community centers and the Arch social clubs. And that is what we mean at the bottom of that page by community centers of power, which is Roadside's paraphrasing of Bayard Rustin, the great civil rights strategist, or free spaces, which is a term by Sarah Evans, second wave feminist historian, and Harry Boyd, civil rights organizer. And these are the spaces that look and feel like the Hemphill Community Center or an Arch Social Club. 7 questions you can ask yourself. Are you in a free space, a community center of power, or not? And this is the major pitfall that those of us with too many letters after our names fall into when we want to quote-unquote engage the quote-unquote community. Because the people that we know are never usually the people that we gotta know. And so it's a matter, you know, I've heard people say, oh, I'm engaging the community, I'm working with the people, I'm working with the county extension office. Or I'm working with the people, I'm working with the city economic development authority. Or the schools.
Schools are like the first target.
Schools in many ways, maybe in some cases, used to be free spaces. Maybe when Hemphill Grade School was open, I'm not sure. But I know a lot of times nowadays they are administered. People do not own what they make in schools, which is a travesty. And one of the things when the Letcher County Culture Hub has done strategy is We want to make our government a free space, but it's not right now.
We've had decades. Sorry.
No, you're fine.
We've had decades of what I call the Save the Dumb Humanities Foundation, who would come and they're going to tell us what we need. And they're going to give us what they think we ought to have, instead of asking us what we need. Instead of building a relationship with us so that they know us. If I go to Baltimore, I didn't used to know this, but if I go to Baltimore, I'm going to go hang out as much as I can with Denise because she's really Baltimore. If you come to Enfield, you come and hang out with the Black Sheep at our community center because we're really the community. You know, there's a lot of other people in these communities, not just us, but we're the boots on the ground. And we might not always have a PhD, but we know what we need, and we know what the true issues are. So you have to kind of, I believe as an organizer or somebody working in a community, you have to have your ear to the ground for that person that's doing the thing, that's making a difference. And that's who you have to hook up with. And then you build relationships out. But going to the county extension office, oh my gosh, in Letcher County, it's a travesty to try to, I mean, we tried to
Literally a
organize.
castle on a hill.
Yes, we tried to organize with them for the Letcher County Culture Hub, they were not interested.
Because they have their programs with their grants, and they're going to administer them, and they're not ready to listen. It's not a matter of what
Can I
people.
say something?
Sure.
I so appreciate what you said. So I think about the city of Baltimore, and I think about what was agreed on by the school board, some years ago, passing grade B's and D. That's the expectation that they had for young people in the city of Baltimore. All the people to 60 now. That's the expectation.
And in Letcher,
And the other thing that is, for me, is really a cultural thing, because Baltimore is my home. I've always lived in Baltimore. And so, coming up culturally in the community, the way that you communicated with one another and connected to one another was your family's last name and what school you went to. Well, no respect to people who have earned their knowledge, read books, and graduated, so no disrespect whatsoever. But to make decisions that take away from people's history of their community, that's taking away culture. The high school that I graduated from, which was developed as a language arts school, and in 1974, it graduated 1,000 seniors in the city of Baltimore at one school. That school no longer exists. There are a lot of schools that no longer exist. If you talk to a younger generation that are beginning the 30s, late 20s, they're really upset because the school no longer exists. And they had reasons for going to that particular school. You know, they participated in sports and they won state championships and they got trophies. Their trophies are gone. Their schools no longer exist. But the point that I'm making is that people that are educated, again, no disrespect, are making these decisions about people's culture, their stories, their beliefs. And these are folks that are outsiders that are doing this. So that's always interesting to me.
and that prompted in our county, to be a teacher in our county, you only have to have a 2.2 grade language to be a teacher. Because it's so political that the teachers come from the families that have the most voters. And traditionally, that's how it's always been, and that's how it still is.
just heard two things. Every community's got wealth, dignity, pride, and respect it. Every community's got stuff that's fucked up about it, and the people know that. So the issue, this isn't just keep communities exactly the way they are. We know we need change. And the issue isn't don't ever come in as an outsider, because we know we need new ideas. But come in as a fellow citizen, ready to listen and ready to speak in the context of a community center of power. They're harder to find. They can be harder to work with because they're often volunteer-led, they're understaffed, they're underfunded. But when you can do it, that's where the real serious work can happen. And this project is living proof that we can create stories together over any kind of differences. And not only create stories, but through creating stories, build power, create wealth, and make a future, new knowledge,
share leadership,
make a future that's different from what we thought it had to be.
Now, we want outsiders to come.
yeah, we want your support.